Now, we've had some fun with Jake Tapper's book that uncovered the hidden story, the revelation, the breaking blockbuster. Now it can be told. It told us that Biden's brains were mashed potatoes. We talked about that book. We made fun of Jake Tapper because it's the last thing that anyone expected a real journalist like Jake to uncover, the truth. Well, now we've got a brand new Joe Biden book, and it actually has some real reporting in it, and it has some stunning revelations. Now, we're going to share those details as they've just come out today. You're going to get it in a sec. First, though, we do have breaking news on Capitol Hill. First, actually, the beginning of the story begins at 1600 Pennsylvania, where the White House late last night released a letter specifically to Dr. Kevin O'Connor, no relation. He was Joe Biden's doctor. And this letter from the White House officially releases Kevin O'Connor from any concerns regarding executive privilege protecting the presidency. Understand something. Executive privilege does not carry just for one president to the next. It transcends each president and each presidency. It protects the executive branch of government. In other words, the executive privilege that George Washington enjoyed, that he protected when he was president, extends to the current president. So it is, in fact, within the power of any given president to waive that executive privilege for people who worked in previous administrations. And that's exactly what the White House did for the president's physician. Any question that Congress was to ask of Kevin O'Connor today behind closed doors in a private session of the Oversight Committee, the White House preempted O'Connor from claiming executive privilege. That was a great move, a chess move by the Trump administration with this letter because of the extraordinary events in this matter. In fact, they specifically say the extraordinary events of this matter constitute exceptional circumstances warranting an accommodation to Congress. Evidence that aides to former President Biden concealed information regarding his fitness to exercise the powers of the president and may have unconstitutionally exercised those powers themselves to aid in their concealment implicates both Congress's constitutional and legislative powers. In other words, this is a protected right that we hold here, executive privilege at the White House. And we hold tight to that when Congress is trying to dive into affairs that don't concern them, where they're trying to pry or go on a fishing expedition. But the extraordinary circumstances of a prior administration protecting the truth about the incapacity of a president and taking on the powers of the president outside of the confines of the Constitution, that transcends our executive privilege, narrowly confined to this matter. Because of that, we waive executive privilege for this questioning session. Now, a cynic might look at that and say, well, there's Trump just trying to go after Biden by waiving executive privilege. But no, I actually do believe this is an extraordinary constitutional concern. And the Trump White House, even though they benefit by attacking their predecessor, actually do want to make sure everything is clear and ordered and constitutional with regard to the mental fitness of the President of the United States. That being said, Kevin O'Connor, physician to Joe Biden, still refused to answer questions. He did not claim executive privilege. Actually, it appears he claimed his own personal Fifth Amendment privilege and potentially doctor-client privilege. Here's what the breaking story is from James Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee. President Joe Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, just pled the Fifth at his deposition before Congress today. It's now clear there was a conspiracy to cover up President Biden's cognitive decline after Dr. Kevin O'Connor, Biden's physician and family business associate, refused to answer any questions and chose to hide behind the Fifth Amendment. Now, this is interesting. Doctor-client privilege is one thing. And by the way, I would argue that a doctor who is employed by the United States people, we're the client here. We may not be the patient, but we're the client. We pay for this doctor to examine the president on our behalf, number one. Number two, this physician submitted public documents to the American people claiming that Joe Biden was in perfect health. He's on record saying that. That means he's already waived certain types of doctor-client privilege to reveal to the American people and to the world the results of his examination. If he's willing to do that, then those results are open to inquiry, public inquiry. That's number two, right? It's not like your doctor releases a statement to the world about your health, right? So asking and getting answers to questions about your health would be a violation of doctor-client privilege. Not in this case, not if the doctor preemptively already made public statements about that health. But here's the third thing that's really interesting. The Fifth Amendment is a protection in the Constitution against you incriminating yourself in some kind of criminal liability. You don't have to testify, and the government cannot compel you to testify and say something that might put you in jeopardy of criminal prosecution. So when Kevin O'Connor, the doctor of Joe Biden, pleads the Fifth, the only way the Fifth Amendment is applicable here is if, by revealing the truth and testifying honestly to a government entity like the Congressional Oversight Committee, Kevin O'Connor could then be putting himself in a vulnerable position of criminal prosecution. Think that through for a minute. Joe Biden's doctor, in answering questions about Joe Biden's health, could be opening himself up to criminal liability. Why exactly? Unless he was involved in a conspiracy to cover up the true nature of Joe Biden's mental health, and he was aware, if not a full participant in that conspiracy and that cover-up that allowed other people to circumvent the constitutional powers of the presidency. That's the danger Kevin O'Connor faced today when he went to Capitol Hill, and then he pled the Fifth. That's actually huge. Comer goes on. The American people demand transparency, but Dr. O'Connor would rather conceal the truth. Dr. O'Connor took the Fifth when asked if he was told to lie about President Biden's health and whether he was fit to be president of the United States. Congress must assess legislative solutions to prevent such a cover-up from happening again. We will continue to interview more Biden White House aides to get the answers Americans deserve. Earlier this morning, this was the scene when Dr. O'Connor appeared in the corridors outside the committee.
News right now from a hearing behind closed doors in D.C. President Biden's former physician refusing to answer questions during a House deposition. James Comer, helped leading that hearing, said the following: the American people demand transparency, but Dr. O'Connor would rather conceal the truth, end quote. He cited doctor-patient confidentiality. Yeah. They were trying to give him a way around that, but wasn't budging apparently today.
So we'll see how far it goes.
Yes.
And then a little while later, this was the scene when Dr. O'Connor left that committee hearing after pleading the Fifth.
Dr. O'Connor, how does that?
Will you make any comments to press, sir?
Do you have a message for the committee?
Truly historic moment. As our friend and colleague Vince Colonnese pointed out, Biden's doctor just pled the Fifth to avoid talking about the 25th Amendment. Pleading the Fifth is something that most people didn't see coming. They figured it would be executive privilege, which got waived by the Trump White House this morning. And then they figured maybe it would be doctor-client privilege, which would be tested in court. They'd challenge it. They decided not even to go there. They decided instead to go all the way and plead the Fifth, which means when asked the question, were you told to lie about Joe Biden's health? He said, I plead the Fifth Amendment, which is the amendment that protects you against self-incrimination. That basically tells you everything you need to know. Again, this isn't a court of law, but this is the court of public opinion. And that move is huge. Now, this comes just as a brand new book about Joe Biden's presidency and the decline of his health, especially in the 2024 presidential election year, is released. The author of that book, Wall Street Journal reporter, was on Fox News this morning. Take a look.
I think the insularity and the warped sort of information that Biden was getting from his top advisors, particularly after the debate. Insularity, how they were keeping information from him, how people who had the truth could not even get to him, could not reach him on the phone, how his pollsters repeatedly wanted to meet with him, were blocked from meeting from him, how his top aides, Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon, gave him things that were not necessarily consistent with what others viewed as reality, and how a lot of his even longtime friends, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, could not reach him in those period of time. I think the insularity and the warped.
All right, and a little bit more from this that I want you to see, and then we'll get into the details of the book.
What if his aides on the campaign, the fundraisers, called and said, we're not getting any more money? They saw the polling. They had members of Congress, senators, calling them and saying, we're going to lose every state. We're going to lose majorities in both parties. He has to get off the ticket. And they would not take the information to him. They would not, his top people would not share it with him.
All right, so they're hiding all this information from him within the campaign about his chances in re-election. What does that tell you about how the White House staff protected him, this insularity that he's talking about? By the way, the book is called 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America. It's by Josh Dawsey and Tyler Pager and Isaac Arsamoff. And they are Wall Street Journal reporters who covered the campaign. A little bit more from the author.
We have these debate memos that we obtained for the book. And his team was pushing him to debate early. And they were saying, this is your only chance to get out there early and try to take Trump on, right? And then they go to debate prep. They spend a week at Camp David, and it doesn't go well, right? There are days where he's sort of better than others. We report in our book, they call Steven Spielberg in to try and do kind of coaching with him. They're working on his facial expressions. They're really trying to make it happen. And Ron Klain, who's running the debate prep, who was his former chief of staff, says to others at the end of a prep, this is really going to be touch and go. I mean, they knew it was going to be rough in Atlanta, and they were hoping by spending a week or two out at Camp David, they could, sort of ameliorate these problems. They weren't able to do that.
No, they sure weren't. Steven Spielberg was brought in, the man who, brought us Jaws and Close Encounters and E.T. and the Jurassic Park CGI dinosaurs. What were they thinking he was going to do? I love the way Democrats think this stuff through, that it's like, well, we just need a Hollywood director. It's all showbiz. We just got to make sure it looks good for 90 minutes on television, and then we're fine. It's really just about his performance. Ultimately, this election was not about Joe Biden's health, obviously, because Kamala Harris took over, and she was young and robust, wasn't she? And Donald Trump won anyway. He was going to win. He beat Biden in July, and then he beat Kamala Harris in November, because ultimately, as Democrats like to bring in Hollywood directors and script writers and deal with the showmanship and the stagecraft and get all of the Hollywood endorsements, think about the endorsements Kamala Harris got. They were going to go to Joe Biden anyway, because they went to Hillary Clinton before that and Obama. They really think Hollywood is who's going to win an election for them. But ultimately, you know why Donald Trump won? Because the country was in sorry shape. It was getting worse. The Democrats had no new ideas. And Donald Trump promised in the campaign that he would turn things around. And he told you exactly how he was going to turn things around. And lo and behold, he has in fact turned things around. And Steven Spielberg ain't going to fix that. You also heard the name Ron Klain thrown out there. Ron Klain is a D.C. guy, political operative, big-time Democrat, comes from Clinton world. And he was managing the debate prep for this disaster of a debate on CNN 1 year ago last month. You know what Ron Klain also was responsible for? He was responsible during the Clinton campaign of 2016 of playing Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton in their debate prep. Ron Klain is a complete and total disaster when it comes to presidential politics. And he was the chief of staff for Biden's super successful presidency. Now, you heard talk about a memo just now, and that memo has now been released for everybody. This is a briefing memo, April 15th. It's from senior advisors to President Joe Biden. This thing is mind-boggling, you guys. Take a look at how it's written. First of all, the fact that it's from senior advisors, right? Yeah, I mean, you're Joe Biden, you're getting this memo. Who's this memo from? They don't bother putting people's names in there because they're afraid he won't understand who they are. and he won't recognize the names. So instead, they just put senior advisors. But look how they write this. It's like for a 5-year-old. Number one, overview. In follow-up to your previous political meeting, every time they use the word you or your in communicating, in writing to Joe Biden, they put it in capital letters and in bold. Because otherwise he wouldn't quite understand, I guess. Or it's meant to draw his eyes to those words so he'll pay closer attention. If somebody can explain to me sort of the psychological need to put Joe Biden's, the pronouns relating to Joe Biden, you or your, in capital letters, or maybe this has to do with people who have cognitive disabilities or spatial awareness problems. I don't know, but it is bizarre. In follow-up to your previous political meeting, your senior advisors continue to recommend you debate and prepare to debate earlier in the cycle. Following your last meeting on debates, we have updated our timing recommendations and highlighted some of the latest developments from news agencies and recent Trump statements below. So this was in April. This is right before they came out with that heavily edited 14-second video where Joe Biden challenged Trump to debate. Remember, make my day. I beat you once. I'll beat you again. I hear you're free on Wednesdays. Remember that whole thing? And Trump's like, fine, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere. And they settled on the CNN debate in June, and then they settled on an ABC debate in September, if you remember. After further discussion, your senior advisors, including Ron and Cedric, continue to believe it's important to move forward with a plan that supports your participation in debates as early as possible with the following goals in mind. So here are the goals for this debate in June. Number one, to debate Trump early and before many Americans would already be voting. 2, to debate 2 times this cycle. The first debate would be in the spring before your Democratic convention in August. And the second debate would be in the early part of September after Labor Day, to set the terms of debate to work best for you and to move quickly to set timing and a plan for debate so you enter the debate process from a position of strength. Yeah, that's right. That debate we all saw, that was Joe Biden operating from a position of strength, not weakness. It's a fascinating insight into American politics and quite possibly one of the most disastrous and monumental blunders in presidential campaign history, the decision to debate early. And maybe it was decided that way because they knew he was going to fall apart and they wanted enough time to shift and change candidates. Byron York, one of the best political writers in Washington, D.C., reports for the Washington Examiner. He pulled out this one portion, section 4 of the memo, and as he puts it, the worst political advice in the history of the world. New book reports on a previously unseen April 2024 memo to Joe Biden from his top campaign advisors, their counsel, debate Donald Trump ASAP. And here was the timing recommendation and the rationale behind it. Your team continues to recommend you commit to 2 debates this cycle with the option to reevaluate after the first debate. Boy, they reevaluated all right, didn't they? The first debate would take place in the spring, and the second debate would take place in early September following Labor Day. By holding the first debate in the spring, here's the rationale for the early debate and CNN. You will be able to reach the widest audience possible before we are deep in the summer months with the conventions, Olympics, and family vacations taking precedence. In other words, they wanted the biggest audience possible for this debate. Like, they were dying for it. They wanted to make sure every eyeball was available to see Joe Biden trounce Donald Trump. In addition, the earlier you are able to debate, the better, so that the American people can see you standing next to Trump and showing the strength of your leadership compared to Trump's weakness and chaos. By the way, again, the buzzwords that they always use. You notice how they constantly use the word chaos to describe the Trump White House this second term. People don't like the chaos that gets up. They're the ones who are causing the chaos, of course. They're the ones who are, all these judicial rulings, it's chaos. Okay, then stop suing the administration because all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. chaos, chaos. It's chaos everywhere. Chaos with Elon Musk and chaos with this is their word. They test these words out and they decide it's going to work. Does life feel chaotic to you right now? Doesn't to me, especially compared to 4 years under Biden. Anyway, I just find that interesting that they wanted to show your leadership compared to Trump's weakness and chaos. That didn't work out too well, did it? And finally, while there is no perfect time to schedule the debate, we've identified an ideal spring window to debate in late June. By the way, these morons, it's not spring. The last week of June is summer. The first day of June is what, June 20th, isn't it? So they don't even know basic elementary school stuff that we learn in second grade. The ideal spring window to debate is late June. Well, that is technically early summer. Ya moron. They should be fired just for that mistake, which will allow for extensive preparation to be built into your schedule. That's right. What we all saw in June on that debate stage on CNN was the results of perfect timing, ideal conditions, a position of strength, and the maximum of extensive preparation. And that's what we got. It's the perfect storm of buffoonery, blunderbuss, and complete and total botched political advice. And to boot, you had Biden, who had mashed potatoes for brains. And I'll take this moment to remind you that for the most part, after the debate, the majority of people on MSNBC, including Rachel Maddow, believed that Joe Biden won that debate. Yeah. Rachel Maddow, go pull the video up. She said, yeah, he started off shaky and his voice was weak, but boy, he finished strong. His voice came back and he had the presence, and it was Trump who was just all over the place at the end of the debate, but Biden really nailed it at the end. Remember how Dr. Jill took him to a rally and said, you answered every question. You did so good, Joe. And it only took 4 weeks for him to drop out and make history by relinquishing his party's nomination before he could even get it. Oh, what a time to be alive it's been for the last 13 months since that happened. And now we're happy to have this book and learn just how bad it was behind the scenes. So bad that the president's doctor won't even testify about Joe Biden's health and his evaluation of the president, lest he open himself up for criminal prosecution. Yeah, all of that was the presidency that MSNBC and most people in legacy media celebrated as one of the finest in American history.